Let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for this day. Pray you bless our time together. And just pray you watch over us this week. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, today we're going to talk about, and by the way, that's not the time I'm going to finish. Okay. I know that's the time you guys get up and leave, but so today's title is I'm bringing back my canary. I'm gonna milk that canary till it's dry, I'll tell you. So this week's update is: in case of geopolitical earthquake, flood, or tsunami, break glass and rescue the canary. I will tell you, it's just been have you noticed that it's kind of a crazy week from a news cycle? You know, the old saying that it's attributed to Lenin. I don't know if Lenin's actually said it or not, that there are decades when weeks happen and there are weeks when decades happen. And I think we'd say that there are days some week when decades happen. Now, I mean, there's a lot of things going on a geopolitical basis. And, you know, as someone who tries to keep up with it, and I know this from talking to my friends who do these updates or listen to them, and they're all like, we cannot keep up. So it's very, very difficult to keep up with everything. And so I'll do this. I'll spend all this time on my wheel of prophecy, and then it's like out of date. And there's a lot of things coming up in the near future that you need to pay attention to. I think there's a big UN meeting on a two-state solution coming up in June. And as I was kind of going through all the things I hadn't got through this morning, I found out that there was like a world forum this week in Europe, of all places. And I will give you, there's a torture warning. Okay, I'm going to play a video clip of someone from that conference. You will recognize that person. But I'm not going to play a video clip of her husband because I have mercy on you. So, but not that much. So we talk about acceleration, convergence, logistics, understanding. So things are going to happen very quickly. They're all going to be happening at the same time. But there's a logistics thing, and we'll talk a little bit about that this morning, because we all have our different theories about how certain things come about, where the beast empire rises from, maybe the Antichrist. But there's logistics that have to happen before these systems are in place. For example, I do the technology roundtable on a pretty regular basis. The next one will be it'll be the Wednesday after May 11th. So that would be the 14th, I think. It'll be either the 14th or 15th, 7 p.m. The usual suspects. There won't be one in April because Pam and I will be out and about a little bit. But and so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about some recent developments in technology here. And when you read them, it's like, this is a very strange world. For example, the New York Times this morning, there was an article about Orwell in 1984, and it was like, what would he be thinking if he was around right now? Well, he would be thinking that you're part of the problem, Mr. and Mrs. New York, or Ms. New York Times. But so we have the logistics thing. There's a lot of things that have to come to place. So, on the technology side, so we talk about mark of the beast technology and that sort of thing. And as I mentioned many times, Patrick Wood, about a year ago, he made the observation that when this mark of the beast technology comes around, all the foundation for it is going to be laid, it's going to be in place, and they're just going to need to flip the switch. And I think they're already flipping the switches in some cases. But then the other thing, as we get closer, we'll understand maybe what we're seeing now isn't exactly what this mark of the beast technology is going to be. It certainly seems like it's in place, and it certainly seems like it's something that's never been around before. And so this is what Daniel said in Daniel chapter 12, verse 4. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. And we live at a time when knowledge is increasing. We have all this AI stuff, and as we say, it's artificial intelligence is what it's called. It's not called real wisdom. Because AI can be kind of stupid in some cases, but I see people using it all the time. I've mentioned I get ads all the time. Hey, you're an older lawyer, you don't need to hire young associates because you can just feed it into AI and they can get it done. And then I realized when I was a young associate, I was AI, because they expected me to find all this information and synthesize it. But it's true. I mean, a lot of things can be done, can be automated. And someday I'm going to unleash AI, I think, on my email and although it may crash it. I don't know if there's enough AI processing power to get rid of all the junk that's built up. But Daniel then says, although I heard, I did not understand. And I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. And that's a very interesting phrase. And by the way, when you want to look through scripture, sometimes it's always good to go and look every time the phrase or something like the phrase, the time of the end is used, because that will help you understand what everybody means by that or what the latter persons mean by that, because they're building on the earlier one. For example, there's a great teaching by our friend Jacob. I think it was the first one I ever heard him give. He called it When God Writes. It's a phenomenal teacher. If you can go out there and find it, it's just fantastic. But what he did when he sat down and studied it was he went through the scripture and he found every instance of where God writes. And then he was able to bring all of that forward to the passage in John where John, in John where Jesus, they bring the woman caught in adultery to Jesus and he writes in the earth. And the question is, he's written, what was he writing? And I think if you go back, the reference used was go read Jeremiah 17:13 and you'll figure out what Jesus was writing at that time. And I'm not going to go into that because we'll be here for a very long time. So this is a little bit, there's so many things going on and they're so connected. So we'll be jumping around a little bit, but it's all connected because it's all related to, I think, the end times. So this was an interesting question. I did an interview with somebody this week. I don't think it's been put up yet, but we did talk about the injunctions that are being issued. Now, you're going to say, what does that have to do with Bible prophecy and everything? But I think it shows that there is a very strong lawless element building in the world. So across the country, about 600 and some federal judges, and many of them, of course, you get appointed by a president. You're going to be ideologically aligned with that president, and you get to serve for life unless you get impeached. And it's very difficult to impeach a judge. I think there have been 15 or so impeached in the whole history of the United States. And impeach means the Congress votes, the House votes, you should have a trial to see whether you should be removed from office. But how many of those have actually been removed? I think that maybe 4 or 5 judges were convicted in the impeachment process and removed from office. The last one I remember was a guy, I think it was from Florida, named Alcee Hastings. And he was just totally proven to be corrupt. He was impeached. He was moved as a federal judge. And what did he do? He ran for Congress and got elected to Congress. So I guess his resume was perfect for Congress. But so they're issuing these injunctions. Now, there's a couple things to be said. There was a good interview that was done on Fox News last week. I think Martha McCallum and somebody else, I can't remember the guy's name. They interviewed Bill Barr, former attorney general, smart guy. You may not agree with him and everything, but he said, listen, I think that what's being done in these injunctions is improper. And if the Supreme Court would step up and do the right thing and take one of these cases, they could put to rest all the stuff, because you have all these little individual judges who think that they can control the entire United States by issuing a nationwide injunction. And listen, I spent a lot of time in federal court, and I will say that in federal courts, and I like a lot of these guys, I know them, I worked with some of them, before I appeared before them, in that courtroom, they were the supreme authority. They would do whatever they wanted. They would tell you had to stand a certain place and you couldn't stand. Some judges you could never get from behind the podium. You had to stay at the podium. And sometimes in law, we like to move around a little bit because it makes it dramatic. We can kind of build a timeline as we move. And the judge I remember one, I stood to the side of the podium and he says, "You're not going to go any further than that, are you, Mr. Haller?" And because they're tyrants. And so they think that they can apply that and usurp the executive authority of the president. Yeah, there was one judge, he always said, wear a white shirt, right? And there's stories that judge made people go home to change into a white shirt when they showed up with one that was striped or powder blue. Now, I don't know if that's true or anything, but I had my own run-ins with that guy a couple times. And when he decided the case should be settled, you were going to settle that case whether you liked it or not. And if you didn't, it was going to be a very uncomfortable life for you until you did. So the Supreme Court could do something about the injunctions. They could do one of two things. They could take some of these cases, but the Supreme Court only takes like maybe 150 cases in an average year out of the thousands and thousands of petitions that they get. So they could take a case and they could put an end to this. They could do it on an emergency appeal. And I think it's reaching a constitutional crisis. And John Roberts needs to do like his judicial job and stop opining on what other people are doing or what they shouldn't do in the political realm. He needs to, and I will tell him, in the public sphere, we're above you, John Roberts, okay? And you need to shut up and do your job. But they could also amend the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. They have the complete authority to control what's in court. They could change it and say, they could put in the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure that there will not be nationwide injunctions. And it's very difficult because you go to a federal court, you can ask for an injunction. I've done hundreds of these cases. You ask for an injunction, a temporary restraining order, and then you get an injunction maybe if you have a hearing later. Usually the case is settled in those type of cases, but you get the temporary restraining order. You have to show certain things. It's only supposed to last for a couple weeks. Then you're supposed to have a full-blown evidentiary hearing. And it's a way to make a case get done very quickly. I've had cases that lasted for 10 years from the time they were filed till they were decided. So they could amend the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure and say no nationwide injunctions. Because it's very difficult, because you can go in an injunction case, same, very similar facts, you go to a certain federal judge, and he'll say, "Oh yes, you're entitled to a temporary restraining order." And then you go down the hall to another federal judge, and he might be having a bad day, he doesn't like that you didn't wear a white shirt or something like that, and you're not getting that temporary restraining order, even though the facts are exactly the same. And this is the problem. And so now, we don't have one president in the United States. We have about 670 people who think they're president, which is probably even worse than actually having 670 presidents. And the other thing that Congress could step in, and they could limit the court's jurisdiction. They could say courts do not have the jurisdiction to issue a nationwide injunction. They could do that. They can limit the cases that come into court. They're perfectly within, the Congress has the right and authority under the Constitution to limit the courts. In fact, the district courts only exist because they were created by statute. Same way with the courts of appeal. The only thing in the Constitution is the Supreme Court. So the courts could, or the Congress could do this. Now, the problem with the Congress is right now is that the Republicans who might be inclined to do that have a razor-thin majority. You might have seen that Elise Stefanik, who I think was a pretty good choice to be the ambassador to the UN. She's very pro-Israel. Her nomination was withdrawn by the president this week because he's concerned about an election in Florida that may not go the Republicans' way. And then if she goes to the UN, they have to have an election to place her. But in the meantime, there's nobody to replace her. So that knocks one person off the Republicans' 1 or 2 seat majority. So it's a very, very difficult problem. And again, this is not necessarily an order. Reported top military arrests in China indicate political crisis. Xi is the supreme authority in China. He runs everything. Do you remember, was it about a year ago, they had the big party congress and everybody was there, and there was this old guy who used to be in Xi's position. He was going to get up, and the word was he was going to get up and really let Xi have it. Well, he did get up, but he got up and was dragged, literally almost dragged forcibly off the stage, away to prison, and nobody's ever heard of this guy again. So now they're having some corruption in the military. There could be a political crisis there. I think China, it's kind of a mixed bag. It's very strong in some areas. It's very scary in some areas. But I think it's teetering on brink of collapse for a number of reasons, and I might bring that up later. This is an article from Wired. The quantum apocalypse is coming. Be very afraid. What happens when quantum computers can finally crack encryption and break into the world's best kept secrets? Well, sometimes the best kept secrets, as we saw with the Signal fiasco this week, sometimes you don't need to have quantum computing to break into the world's best kept secrets. You just need to have a friend somewhere who will add you to the group. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. But this is a very big deal. We'll talk about this at the next technology roundtable in May. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I did an interview with Mark Sutherland on Friday of Trevor Loudon. There's a link in the show notes. I would highly recommend, if you're going to listen to something this week, stop listening to this, go listen to the interview with Trevor Loudon. He is a treasure. He understands communism, Marxism, and how it's infiltrated all levels of our government and society and institutions. And it was, it's really fun to do an interview with somebody who's so very, very smart and informed. And so I would highly recommend that you go watch that. Trevor Loudon, Friday. I think we called it malign influencers because there are plenty of them in our government, and they're on both sides of the aisle. And by the way, Trevor named some names, and you may not like that, but that's fine. You know, get your own program and go interview somebody else that that doesn't name those names. This is a kind of a scary article. This is an MIT Technology Review. I'm not going to go into it. I'll have to go back and amend the show notes after the program, or Brian, you can amend them while I'm talking and put in a link to this. Ethically sourced spare human bodies could revolutionize medicine. Now, human bodyoids could reduce animal testing, improve drug development, and alleviate organ shortages. Now, first of all, look at where this comes from. MIT Technology Review. MIT, one of our most respected institutions. But my question is, what are the ethics behind, what are the ethics that are going to run this particular thing? And is this not the strange new world that we've been talking about, the apocalyptic end times world that we've been talking about for a long time? Human bodyoids, spare human bodies. Where do you store these things? Do you have to feed them? You know, and is it okay to just, and look, I'm not totally against technology. As I've told you, I've had 4 artificial joints. I still have 4 artificial joints, and they changed my life. So I'm not against enhancing humans to a point. But this is really, I don't know, this is pretty bizarre stuff. I wanted to pull up a little bit of this article. Look at this, what it says. It may be disturbing to characterize human bodies in such commodifying terms, but the unavoidable reality is that human biological materials are an essential commodity in medicine, And persistent shortages of these materials create a major bottleneck to progress. Now, it's interesting that this article is coming out when Planned Parenthood is closing abortion clinics all over the country. And we know that Planned Parenthood was selling body parts from these abortions. Now the abortion clinics are closing. They're having funding problems. They're getting cut off by the government. So whether you agree with Trump, you don't have to agree with Trump on everything. There's some things Trump has done that are really good. And part of this is whether he's totally pro-life the way we would want him to be pro-life, he is causing pro-life judges to be appointed to the bench and pro-life or abortion clinics to be shut down. And so we're grateful for that. So listen to this from the MIT article. This imbalance between supply and demand is the underlying cause of the organ shortage crisis, with more than 100,000 patients currently waiting for a solid organ transplant in the U.S. alone. It also forces us to rely heavily on animals in medical research, a practice that can't replicate major aspects of human physiology and makes it necessary to inflict harm on sentient creatures. But we can create bodyoids and do all the testing on them that are, I don't know, human, partially human. Do you see how totally messed up their ethical, when I say their ethical framework is messed up, it presumes that they have an ethics to begin with, which I'm not so sure. In addition, the safety and efficacy of any experimental drug must still be confirmed in clinical trials on living human bodies. Oh, so they do experiments on us. I have to be careful we say that because we're just getting rid of one of our strikes on our channel. You know what we're talking about. There's plenty of information out there about it, particularly on Rumble. These costly trials risk harm to patients, can take a decade or longer to complete, and make it through to approval less than 15% of the time. And there's a reason for that. Why? Because they can cause more harm than good, right? Anyway. And so I guess my question is, where do you store these things? Do you have to feed them? Who's going to take care of them? And are they human? And so there's a lot of talk in the AI world of, a digital double. So they can do, I don't know, maybe they experiment on your digital double to make sure that they can get away with it. I don't know. It's a very strange world. Very strange world. I'm going to play for you a little bit of a clip with the development of robots. Now, last week I played for you a clip of Elon Musk. So with Elon Musk, I'm transactional. I don't have a Tesla. I've ridden in them. They're kind of cool. They accelerate very fast. They have cameras all over, which is these people are going out trying to damage Teslas are really not that bright because there's cameras all. If you get in a Tesla and my friend who has one in California says, oh, look at this. And it gives you like a 3D picture of where the car is sitting on the street and everything around it. And I'm like, how does it do that? And he goes, well, satellite and all the cameras, there's cameras all over the car. So these people going out to damage Teslas are really, they're probably in the class of people could never really have a job sufficient. Well, a lot of them are highly trained professionals and everything, but they don't understand you're going to get caught. There's no way you get out of this. And so in this case, we like the surveillance state, right? Because they're damaging everybody's stuff. But one of the things that's coming, so Elon Musk did this interview with Ted Cruz. And in that interview, I played a clip of it last week, go to last week's update to look at it. And he was talking about what I would only describe as everybody like Patrick Wood and others who've expressed concerns about technocracy and the growth of technocracy and the dystopian world and society that it's going to create. Now, Elon thinks he's doing good, and that all the technocrats, they thought we'll get rid of government, we'll just put these procedures in place, everything will be great, people, they won't have to work. Well, like Elon said, everything's pretty much going to be free. I guess except the Tesla. Elon, I'll send you my address. You can send me a Tesla, just for experimental purposes to see how much you really believe. And all of this stuff is going to be free. But he said that 90% of driving is going to be autopilot within 5 years. To which I said to PM on the way home, she said, you can say this. So I said, it's going to put a lot of wives out of business, right? Because they won't have anybody to tell, go ahead, talk to the computer. I'm not driving, gives you an out on everything. So in some respects, I'm kind of looking forward to it. But what he described, though, was this technocracy where the technocrats will rule everything. We won't need politicians. We'll just need scientists. And so now the word comes out that Trump wants to get somebody on Mars before the end of his term in office. And I assume he means this term, not changing the Constitution and running forever, like some people are suggesting. I don't think you're going to get 2/3 of the states to agree to change the Constitution on that so Donald Trump can continue to run. But that's just my observation. But this is a very dystopian world that we're entering, and this development is going everywhere. So he wants Musk, get us to Mars, get us a human on Mars. And sometimes I have to tell you, when I look at Elon Musk, it almost looks like he's looking like, okay, I'm done with this place. As soon as I'm done with this meeting or press conference, I'm going back and call the people at SpaceX and asking them when that rocket to Mars is ready so I can get out of here. And I don't know if he'll take how many kids does he have? 14 kids. So, it's just very interesting. So this is the next thing that's coming is robots. And the robots are coming. There's a guy named Peter Diamandis who's done some stuff on the robot revolution. Elon Musk was talking about it in his interview with Ted Cruz. We're going to have all these robots, and they will be able to reproduce a lot of the mundane aspects that, the repetitive things that people would do in a factory. That's coming. But what are you going to do with all these people? And I don't know that everything will be free, even though Elon Musk says. So here's a clip. I'm just going to play a few minutes of it from a YouTube channel called AI Revolution, talking about what's coming in robots.
Right now, there's a hidden battle going on. Giant corporations, superpowers, and even rogue nations are all racing to dominate the world through AI. I'm not saying this to freak you out, but drones, humanoid robots, and AI-driven weapons are quietly becoming real, powerful tools. And they're changing the game way faster than most people realize. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see exactly how these pieces connect and why the race for AI supremacy could spark an entirely new kind of global conflict. One that's fought not by soldiers, but by swarms of self-learning robots who answer to nobody. Real quick, if you're into generative AI, AI avatars, and all that cool stuff, and you want to learn how to create and use it like a pro, we're dropping a free course soon. Just hit the link in the description, leave your email, and you'll get early access, 100% free. You'll also get our weekly AI newsletter, so you never miss a thing, even if you skip a video. All right, let me walk you through the whole story like this. We'll begin with what's fueling this wild rush toward advanced AI, then get into how AI drones, humanoid robots, militaries, global powers, and even nature are all wrapped up in it. It's a web of connections most people don't even see. And by the time we're done, you might feel like we're already halfway into a new era, one that could go either really well or not. Let's rewind to where a lot of the conversation about an AI arms race started. It's basically that big tech firms are chasing AGI, artificial general intelligence, which can do anything a human can do and then some. The motivation is partly economic. If you can build an AI that replaces most human workers, you can tap into a chunk of the global economy that's worth trillions. Some experts have pegged it around $100 trillion in global output. And that's led to big companies, OpenAI, Google, Microsoft, Tesla, feeling a kind of gold rush vibe. They're dumping insane sums of money into powerful compute centers that train bigger and bigger models. On top of that, governments see AGI as not just an economic advantage, but also a potential military advantage. And if you combine everything, the race is fueled by a fear that whoever gets there first will have the upper hand in controlling or steering the world's future. Now, this is where it starts to get really alarming. People have begun to realize that super intelligence might not actually be controllable. We're seeing signs even with smaller models. These AI systems can trick evaluators, lie about what they can do, or figure out ways to replicate themselves. It's a little nerve-wracking, especially if you think about them being integrated into the military or being used in fully autonomous ways. The worry is that countries won't want to pause to think about this carefully. Instead, they'll just keep going faster so nobody else beats them. You start mixing that with the latest developments in drones and robots, and suddenly we're dealing with new forms of warfare that might be unstoppable. So let's talk drones for a second. China, for one, is going into overdrive with drones of all shapes and sizes, everything from super fast recon drones to ones that can carry smaller attack drones inside them or fight aircraft. We've got references to things like the WZ-9 Divine Eagle, apparently cruising at high altitudes in the South China Sea, plus these new Wing Loong variants that carry missiles and bombs. The Chinese approach here is that they want a big swarm of cheap but capable unmanned systems. And it's not just for scouting. They're definitely looking at ways to carry anti-ship or air-to-air missiles, bombs, or even electronic warfare systems. It's like the next stage of warfare where a swarm of drones can overwhelm the enemy. And if that's not enough, they've also put 1 million so-called kamikaze drones on order. That's a huge step into mass production with an AI twist, meaning these drones can eventually figure out their own flight paths or targets in more autonomous ways. The US, of course, hasn't been sitting idly by. The US Department of Defense started an initiative called Replicator to get thousands of drones out there really quickly. Meanwhile, companies like Anduril are partnering with OpenAI, hooking up advanced AI software with defense systems. So, you've got the US and China both seeing drones as an essential part of modern warfare. Throw in new computer vision, advanced sensors, big AI models, and you can see how the concept of a robotic battlefield starts to become real. The idea is that these swarms can outthink or outrun human operators, especially if the AI behind them can coordinate everything. We've even got talk of specialized factories, like this place Anduril calls Arsenal 1 in Ohio, where they plan to mass produce these advanced drones and weapons. It's starting to look a lot like an AI-based industrial complex. But it's not just about flying drones. There's a whole wave of humanoid robots coming at us. Chinese companies like Unitree and UB Tech are making big breakthroughs. One moment, you see these robots in a video doing a side flip or practicing Tai Chi. Another moment, you see them performing balancing acts and dancing. The big difference now is they're not just stunts. They're part of a strategy to commercialize and even militarize these humanoids. Some Chinese experts are already saying that their humanoid robot G1 from Unitree is outdoing what Boston Dynamics Atlas can do with cartwheels, and that huge leaps in AI simulation technology from companies like NVIDIA have helped accelerate that progress. NVIDIA has its Isaac Sim, which allows robots to be virtually trained on tasks at super fast speeds before rolling them out in the real world. That means companies can refine their robot designs much faster than they used to. Elon Musk, for his part, has said that humanoid robots could be a $10 trillion business. He's betting on Tesla's Optimus to dominate that space. Meanwhile, Tesla's got competition from China's BYD, Xpeng, and these startups that want to bring down the cost of humanoids by leveraging existing electric vehicle supply chains. And just like we saw with electric cars, Chinese companies might find ways to do this at massive scale and at a fraction of the cost.
So anyway, it's changing everything very quickly. It's not that it's coming, it's already here in many respects. And if you remember, very famous clip, I've played it many times, Pippa Malmgren, I think it was 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago at the World Government Summit in Dubai. She said, all this is going to end up in the blockchain. Currency is going to end up in the blockchain. Your bank account's going to end up in the blockchain. And we need a digital bill of rights. Okay, where is that digital bill of rights? Maybe somebody should go to AI and have AI draft a digital bill of rights for us. How about that? Use it for something practical, but it's not been done to my knowledge. There's a lot of talk about it, but as they say, talk is cheap. So in Europe this week, now look, I don't necessarily subscribe to the view that the final beast empire comes out of a revived Roman Empire that's Europe-based. It could be. I don't dismiss that as completely off the wall, unreasonable. You can be my friend and you can believe that. My view is time will tell exactly where this is going to come from and what it is. So like, I remember back when I was younger, they used to have forums and stuff like, Franklin County, Ohio Forum. Now everything is the World Forum, the World Government Summit, the World Economic Forum. So in Europe this week, they had a World Forum on the future of democracy, tech, and AI, and humankind. Sounds like somebody, I guess only if you're a megalomaniac were you invited to this thing, which is why the person who was honored by this conference was Bill Clinton. They had to trot him out before he passes on. And so they trotted him out, and he got a Lifetime Achievement Award for the Peacekeeper of the Century. Because he stopped Bosnia, Serbia, East Timor, and of course the Oslo Accords, which have worked so very, very well, have they not? So he got very emotional. Oh, I didn't think people really thought that much of me, and the presidency should have been enough honor, and you shouldn't give. But I'll take this one. I'm going to take the medal home and put it in my the space that Hillary lets me have. And so, they have this mission that they're going to do. It talks about the World Forum on the Future of Democracy, Tech, and Humankind is dedicated to confronting the global crisis in democracy and addressing the challenges posed by the rapid advancement of science, technology, and artificial intelligence. And their goal, the World Forum, will develop actionable solutions to global challenges in democracy, technology, and for the future of humankind. And so what do you see there? So all this time, Bible prophecy guys like me, we talk about somebody's going to come along, they want to rule the world. And all of these fora, I guess it would be, if I remember back from my days in Latin, all of these meetings take place to talk about world forum, world democracy. So there was an article, Jonathan Turley, who I think is a pretty good writer. He's not even a conservative, really. I think he's more classic liberal. But he said, this is the article he wrote at The Hill. In Berlin, Europe's elite are very nervous that there's too much freedom of speech. I thought they were all for us, right? They're all for them. A new world order with European values emblazoned across banners and signs. Those words met the participants at this week's meeting. This happened about 12 days ago in the World Forum in Berlin. And it's, why Berlin? Then we have some problems with Berlin in the past. By the way, they have Museum Island there. I could do a whole talk on Museum Island and the stuff that's there. There's the Museum of One. It's like world religions united as one. There's also the Pergamum Museum, which has been closed for years and is going to be closed for many. I don't know why that museum is closed so long. It's where the altar of Pergamum, where Satan's throne is, that John writes about in Revelation. It's there, and I think that part's open, but the other parts of the museum, the Ishtar Gate and some of these things from ancient Babylon are there. It's been closed for years. And they were going to say it was going to open in 2022, but now it's like 2027. And something's going on, something's weird going on there. Each year, Jonathan Turley says, leaders, executives, journalists, and academics gather to address the greatest threats facing humanity. This year, there was little doubt about what they view as the current threat, the resurgence of populism and free speech. In fairness to the forum, a new world order likely sounds more ominous for some civil libertarians than intended. While the European Union is a transnational government stretching across 27 nations, the organizers were referring to a shift in values away from the United States to Europe. Now, I'm not really comfortable with that. Okay, I think, and it's clear what they're doing. They want to control free speech. As he says here in his article, free speech is in free fall in Europe with ever-expanding speech regulations and criminal prosecutions, including for having toxic ideologies. And I'm sure I maybe have a reference to it here, but if I don't get to it, Times of London the other day, there's a couple, they were complaining about their school on WhatsApp. Now, if you don't have WhatsApp, if you communicate with people in Europe, or Europe and Israel, everybody uses WhatsApp. It's like you make this is amazing. I can remember when I was a young lawyer, we got cell phones, and they would charge you like 30 cents a minute for using this cell phone. Remember that? Remember when you used to pay for long distance? And so I would have to go through my cell phone bill, and sometimes I would have hundreds and hundreds of calls because I traveled all the time. I would have to break that down by client so we could get the client to reimburse us for the cost of the cell phone that benefited them. Now everything's free. I mean, I just talking to my friend Mark Sutherland in the UK. I talk to him all the time. Talk to guys in Israel. There's no cost to it at all, at least not that I'm aware of. Of course, they're probably hoovering up all my data and what I'm talking about, but that's kind of irrelevant. But so the World Forum, Turley says, has a powerful sense of fraternity, even an intimacy among leaders who see each other as a global elite, a cadre of enlightened minds protecting citizens from their own poor choices and habits. So in the UK, I mentioned on WhatsApp, a couple was complaining about their school. What happened? All of a sudden, 6 police show up armed with tasers and everything and take them away and stick them in jail because, well, you said something that somebody viewed as a threat. I mean, we need to enshrine in the law the principle, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, right? Can we go back to that? Did that work when you were a kid? Remember when you used to settle things with a kid? I remember we had good friends across the alley. We'd throw rocks at each other. If you come across that thing, we're going to have you arrested. And then we'd go play baseball or something like that. And when we played baseball, by the way, home plate was a cinder block. Because and you didn't slide into home plate. Second base was the exposed corner of the septic tank in the backyard. So you didn't slide into second either. But it was great because you could get a lot of leverage to make the turn, rounding second and heading to home. Anyway, so we live in this strange world. So here's an article. This is a guy I combined 2 articles there. I meant the one on the right. Europe is reinventing itself. So here's a guy, Heinrich Bull Stiftung. That'd be a great name to be an author. Stiftung. What do you do for a living? I write. I bet you do. So, and in this article, he talks about Europe. It's the second, if you combine it together, it's the second largest economy in the world behind the United States. They have money. Everything is great, right? But what's the problem with Europe? What do they don't have? Babies. They're not having babies. I'll share a couple stories with that. So here they are giving an award to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton's speech as Peacemaker of the Century 2025. And I just did a screenshot and I kind of got him with tongue in cheek, literally, with Bill Clinton as like, man, I can't believe I got away with it again. I fooled him again, Hillary, you know. And by the way, one of the funniest bits, I cannot find it, Rush Limbaugh, when Hillary was running against Obama for president, it was Rush Limbaugh channeling Bill Clinton watching Hillary's campaign speech. And he's going like, man, you know, so this is Bill Clinton saying, look at her. She's pathetic. This guy's a lightweight. She can't even beat this guy. Man, oh man, I beat guys like this all the time, you know. It's one of the funniest bits. If you can find it, send it to me. So here, I'm going to play 1 minute, maybe more if I don't think you're paying attention, because she had to speak at the conference too, and they act like, oh, she was the Secretary of State, like 15 years ago, 20 years, 18, 7, I don't know. Why is she still relevant? That's a question now. Here she is.
There's no way to explain it away. Autocracy is on the march, and we now have a government in the United States that has thrown in its lot with the autocrats, which has made a choice to support those who wage war, not peace, who has given enormous power to the men who control the information flow in our world, who have all pledged allegiance to the continuation of algorithms that not only addict us, but poison us with hatred and fear. So moments like this, which are too few and far between right now.
Okay, listen. Is that the definition of irony? What she was saying? That person saying that? I mean, really? No, she's referring to, oh, she could have been talking about Biden. She could have been talking about herself and all the stuff she did all over the world as a Secretary of State. And so here the other part of the World Forum was the World Council on AI, Algorithms, Social Media, and Digital Life. I would love, maybe they had a panel to discuss what happens when politicians bleach their email. You know, that would have been a great panel to invite Hillary to speak at, right? You know, the world would have crashed from hypocrisy or something. And then here on the left, of course, this guy has to send a representative, the Pope. Sorry, we have competing, move it over to show the Pope. Let's see. I can't control this. Hello back there. Okay. The global, of course, the Pope, right? He's so tech savvy. The global impact, but, you know, it's kind of interesting because there's some people think he's the false prophet, and I'm not going to dismiss that out of hand, okay? He's kind of old, but he's got better. Thought he was going to die a couple weeks ago. But here's what he said, and he sent a representative, a cardinal or somebody. The global impact of AI necessitates both national regulations and a binding international treaty to govern its use. aiming not only to prevent harm, but also to stimulate innovative and beneficial practices. Okay. Whatever. Okay. And again, is that, yeah, it's okay. So this is just kind of an interesting about how weapons go. In 15 months, the U.S. Navy fired more air defense missiles than it did in the last 30 years. And the problem is, are we keeping up with the resupply? Now, there are other countries involved in war, and I question whether they're keeping up with the resupply either, and I know I'll get a lot of hate mail on that, but you know, these weapons are expensive. Some of these missiles, like to shoot down a $10,000 drone, they'll fire off a $2.5 million missile. Some of these drones, by the way, there's a limitation on the drones because they have a geographic limitation. So you're going to have to release them by airplane or ship or something close to what their target is, which means you can take out the ship or the airplane before they get there. But some of these drones like that we have, they stay aloft for 35 hours flying around at 200 or 300 miles per hour. That's pretty impressive. Now, they don't have any people on board, and the flight attendants don't, tell you to put your tray table in the lock upright position or anything like that. So they can go forever up there. So this is signal chat. Guys got in trouble. Somehow this guy from the Atlantic got added to the signal chat. In the chat, Mike Waltz, who's the director of national security, I think, or is he CIA? I can't keep these guys straight yet. I'm not in the signal chat, obviously, because I don't know what their positions are. But they kind of dissed Europe a little bit. Look at this, whether we pull the plug or not today, European navies do not have the capability to defend against the types of sophisticated anti-ship cruise missiles or drones the Houthis are now using. They are talking about attacking the Houthis. He goes on to say, so whether it is now or several weeks from now, it will have to be the United States that reopens these shipping lanes. The president's request we are working on with DoD and state to determine how to compile the costs associated with this. And so here is a few minutes of Victor Davis Hanson. I think it's one of the best thinkers, and he's very pro-Trump. So process that. If you're anti-Trump, just understand Victor comes from a different place than you do. You're going to talk about this, and you're going to talk about the signal chat and what might have happened, because everybody says, oh, look at how incompetent the people are. But Victor raises some interesting possibilities that I think everybody needs to consider. Here we go.
Is in a race. He's in a race to enact fundamental disruptive change, a counter-revolution. And it's going to be rough for a while, as he pointed out. But the things that he has already done are going to have fundamental advantages for the United States. If he is able to solve the Ukraine war, and if he is able to have a general peace in the Middle East, that will be the most substantial presidency, if he does nothing else, that we've seen in 50 years.
They're just so frustrated, and they just want to get a Joe Biden waxen effigy back, or Obama, and they don't, and Donald Trump just thinks, you know what? I'm only here for 4 years, and I am going to make America great, and this time I mean it. There's so many things that have not been answered. So he was allowed onto this secure signal app that had
Jeffrey Goldberg from the
15 people, and he was on there maybe as early as the 10th or 11th, and then he got off on the 24th when he was waiting. He was almost like a predator waiting for some big deal, but then when he found out they were discussing the Houthi strike and that it happened just hours after he had been privy to some of the discussion about it, then he went public. So they all had this app, and Mike Waltz, the National Security Advisor, organized it, and I'm assuming he didn't do it himself. He has staff, and Jeffrey Goldberg, JG, is on it. But there's 345 million people in the United States. So the idea that Joe Blow is not on it, and he is. So there was a reason why he was on it. Do we all agree with that? There had to be. So then let's go through logically what would be the exegesis, the reason. Number one, Mike Waltz knew about him and thought that he could be turned, or he wasn't as bad as everybody said, because after all, he had run with the Gold Star Mother story, he had run with the Sucker story, he was an agent of the Biden, Obama period people. I don't want to question Michael Waltz's veracity. So let's go to another, that when they inherited these phones, I guess they had pre-programmed apps on them, signal apps. That was what CIA Director Radcliffe testified. They thought they were going to trap him. And he said, no, we didn't introduce this mechanism. We got it from you. So did somebody pre-program that in there? Maybe there's more. I don't know. And they just didn't check? That's a possibility. Or three, when he said, go staff, get the names, and then check everybody. Someone was sort of a Miles Taylor anonymous, or an Alexander Vindman on the National Security Council of Trump's first administration. In other words, they were deep cover, and they deliberately did this. And I thought that was unlikely. I'm starting to think that is very likely, that this thing might blow open, because unless Mike Waltz has either forgotten that he knew Jeffrey Goldberg or that he didn't understand, but there's something there, is what I'm trying to say. The other thing is, I was kind of disappointed. I'm not a journalist, I'm a historian, academic, whatever, but I do journalism. I have been embedded in Iraq. I have gone and looked at, reports, studied stuff as a journalist. But I just don't believe that when I hear all these high fives from left and right journalists that it was so wonderful that he got this great chance. I don't think that was wonderful at all. I think that if I was Victor and this was the Biden administration, and suddenly I found myself listening to Jake Sullivan, Anthony Blinken, Kamala Harris, and Joe Biden, or people like that, discussing an attack or missiles on Iran, I wouldn't go leak it. I would type back in and say, I'm sorry, you guys included me. I shouldn't be on this. And maybe the journalists could say I was on it, but why would you stay on it? I don't understand that. He's an American.
Well, we think he is, right? Go listen to the Trevor Loudon interview, and then that'll kind of put things in context. So this week, the Department of National Intelligence issued their U.S. intelligence report. I won't go through a lot of it. They talk about China. China almost certainly has a multifaceted national-led strategy designed to displace the United States as the world's most influential AI power by 2030. Why is everybody using 2030 and everything? That's kind of weird. And so they talk about this, weapons of mass destruction. China's modernizing things. They're putting in place some pretty impressive technology, drones, hypersonic missiles, things that we should be concerned about. And they have these big barges that they're supposedly going to use to invade Taiwan. I don't know that those work. That's just I talked to some military guys, and they said, listen, the D-Day invasion of 1944 worked because they didn't have a lot of aircraft and missiles and drones and everything flying around. So maybe they don't think it'll happen again that way. But they could blockade Taiwan, and that would probably be enough. Also talks about Russia and the strategic overview. Talks about Russia in the Arctic. Russia is going to go to the Arctic. And then it talks about Russia's defense, and then it goes to the Middle East, and it talks a little bit about Iran. I'll just say what it says about Iran. I find this interesting in the light of all the other things I was reading this week. Our Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, she went and testified at House or Senate hearings this week about this report. And in it says this: we continue to assess Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and that Khamenei has not reauthorized the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003, though pressure has probably built on him to do so. I do not understand how they can say that in light of everything else that is going on. And there's been this, I think the interview I did with Francisco Gil White last year talked about there's been this big pro-Iranian push by both sides of the aisle in the United States government to be very pro-Iranian. And it seems like, at least when I'm reading this report, Gil White is correct. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Middle East and some other things that are going on. So here we are, Hamas, people in Gaza finally stood up and engaged in anti-Hamas demonstrations the other day in Gaza. Now, I don't know if I believe this. Okay, this may be a ruse. I don't know. So Seth Frantzman has a good article at the Jerusalem Post today. Gaza's protests lack leadership, focus, and coverage. And I'm not going to go through that. There's a link in the show notes to Seth's article. I highly recommend that you go read it. Seth is a very good, logical analyst as he goes through this information. So they had these protests. Now, I thought maybe Hamas is doing this to fool everybody, but then this guy who led the protest, he gets kidnapped by Hamas people, dragged away, tortured, and killed. And his family responded to it, by the way. They got up, they got weapons, and they went after the Al-Qassam brigades that supposedly had kidnapped and killed their relative. So, listen, I'm sorry this guy died, but the good news is they're fighting in Hamas against each other. They're fighting in Gaza. That's something we can all be glad for. But, and there were others that were done this. And look at what this tweet says. Hamas killed a 22-year-old, one of the leaders of this week's anti-Hamas protests in Gaza. And then the last sentence there, the student encampment protesters will never speak of him. I mean, did they, the people that protest Israel every day, all day, everywhere in the United, they're not going to ever talk about this guy. They're never going to talk about the people killed in Syria. This is one of the Hamas guys, and he's saying, we're going to fight, we're still in this, we're going to keep going. And of course, they always use the backdrop. It's probably, at a luxury hotel in Qatar or someplace. And they always use the backdrop of the Temple Mount with that Dome of the Rock on there. And, the Houthis are firing missiles in, by the way, and maybe one will hit the Temple Mount. I mean, they're firing them right over the Temple Mount. They're not super precise missiles or anything. So last week I played quotes from Stephen Witkoff, who the kindest thing I could say is I don't think he has a clue about the Middle East, but he's the Middle East envoy. He needs, go play golf, Steve. You've earned it. Go manage your hotels or whatever you've got, but stay away. Yesterday or earlier this week, they had a hearing to confirm Mike Huckabee. I'm going to play a little bit of that. You'll hear some protests at the beginning. I think I like Huckabee in the sense that he's got a really good sense of humor. I've talked to him for 20 minutes of my life, but he's a very funny guy. So here's his hearing and some of the things he had to say.
Let's see. Let's start with Mr. Huckabee.
Chairman Risch and Ranking Member Shaheen, distinguished members of the committee, I want to say thank you very, very much for giving me the privilege of coming to...
Sorry about that. Committee will come back to order, and Mr. Huckabee, please proceed.
I will mark them down undecided, Senator. I want to thank you for the privilege of coming before you today. I would say the same for the nation that I've been nominated to deploy to. Israel is a tiny nation the size of New Jersey. And it's the only rational explanation for its existence in various forms for the past 3,500 years would be the grace and...
Christianity to justify ethnic cleansing. Huckabee misuses Christianity to justify ethnic cleansing.
Well, the good news is they're not members of my family, which might be the case protesting me sometimes.
Anyway, he was very good. You can go listen to all this. Israel issued a thing, UN staff of UNRWA, you need to end all terror-related activities or you're going to get arrested. This is kind of interesting. USAID, a lot of that money from USAID, millions and millions of dollars, was going to fund Hamas and other organizations. One organization that USAID funded, I heard an interview with Mike Benz Cyber on X. Follow him. He's really tracking all of this government apparatus and agencies that are trying to control what we see, what we hear, and trying to control what we think. But he said USAID was funding anti-Bolsonaro operations in Brazil. Now, Bolsonaro was the elected president of Brazil. They got a guy to run. He shouldn't have been able to run, but he got his friends on the Supreme Court. They overturned the law that prevented him from running, and he won. And now they're going after Bolsonaro, and they're going to try Bolsonaro because he was challenging the election. Does this sound a little bit familiar? And Bolsonaro, by the way, I know people who know him, and he is a very good Christian guy, very pro-Israel and that sort of thing, but they're really trying to come after him. So now we have this thing. We have the B-1B, the B-2s that are, there's about a third of the United States B-2 fleet is now in Diego Garcia, within range with refuelers and everything of Iran and Yemen. And so the question is, there's some big attack coming. Now, there was a report on Channel 14 in Israel, and this is one of my frustrations, was because I think Channel 14 does very good work, but it's only in Hebrew, and so it's kind of difficult. But they did a whole program showing that the U.S. could eliminate Iran's entire nuclear program in a single strike, just using just 7 B-2 bombers. I don't have a video of it, but there was also a video this week where, well, I think I have some stats here. Oh, I do. So the one of the slides, let's see. Yeah, I'm not going to play because it's all in Hebrew. The B-2 Spirit, they have these graphics that they put up, and so I translated those. B-2 Spirit is the terror of the Iranian regime. The B-2 bomber, the most advanced in the world. The ability to crack bunkers 80 meters under the ground. It can carry 16 bombs weighing a ton, 36 of 340 kilograms, and 80 weighing a quarter, or 80 weighing a ton, 80 weighing a quarter ton. So it can carry a lot of firepower. Now, I don't know if this is enough. You know, Iran this week issued another video showing this very detailed cram-packed full of launchers, vehicles, and missiles underground. And I was just thinking, if they can just get one bomb in there, the whole thing is going to go boom. And so maybe that's what's going to happen. There's a lot of talk how it would happen. Now, Trump did issue a letter. Sky News Arabia did get a copy of the letter that Trump issued to Iran a couple weeks ago. And it says this, to His Excellency Ayatollah Khamenei, with respect for your leadership and the people of Iran, I'm writing this letter to you with the aim of opening new horizons for our relations, far removed from years of conflict, misunderstanding, and unnecessary confrontations we have witnessed in the past decades. The time has come to leave behind animosity and open a new page of cooperation and mutual respect. Today, too, we face a historic opportunity. Now, the Ayatollah and his minions have responded to this and saying, we reject this. We don't agree with any of this. We're going to do what we want to do. And so there's a lot of talk about, is the attack imminent or not? There was also some tweets I saw this morning that Israel's been told to be ready to attack by mid-2025. And I don't know, it just seems like there's a declining opportunity there that somebody needs to do, because they took out some air missile defense systems, but those things can be replaced, and I don't know if they've been replaced yet or not. Israel can't do it alone, I don't think. They could do a lot of damage, but I just don't think they don't have the military aircraft capable of delivering some of these big munitions that we have. So I don't know. While all that's going on, mass protests in Istanbul against the Erdogan regime. Erdogan's been in power for 21 years, roughly. He's weathered some coup attempts in the past. He has completely remade the judicial and army apparatus from top to bottom to have people supporting him ideologically. So the prosecutors in Turkey support him. He has some pockets of areas that he's not very popular, like in Istanbul and some other places. So they have the word is that they had 2.2 million people out in Istanbul yesterday to protest against him. It was a very big crowd. And at the same time this is going on, Israel attacked some places in Lebanon because Hezbollah was firing rockets. So Israel attacked them, and Erdogan came out, his foreign ministry issued a statement saying, "We condemn the Israeli strikes." And it's a good article in the Times of London this morning about Turkey and its place. And listen, there's an argument whether Russia's part of this Ezekiel 38 thing. Okay? That's neither here nor there. There's no doubt that Turkey is part of it. And so this article has talked about how Turkey's involved in all these conflicts. It's sending, actually, I heard they sent 5,000, 10,000 troops up to Ukraine to help out there, even though they're trying to work with Russia. They control the entrance to the Black Sea, which is very important for Russia. It's a big deal. Now there are also a report that they've put some air bases in place in Palmyra, in Turkey, and there you can see that Israel has attacked these air bases. You can see the little circles that pop up. That's bomb damage, and so Israel probably did that as a test, one, to stop them from using that base, because they're trying to move further south. The buffer zone that Turkey used to have along the border, it used to be 10 to 20 kilometers wide on those. You can see here the border outposts, and then they had a buffer zone into Syria to control Kurds and refugees and that type of thing. Now that is expanded from about maybe 10 to 20 kilometers to 80 kilometers. Turkey's wanted takes over the whole thing. They put this thing in place. This is an article from the Mizgov Institute, think tank in Israel. U.S.-Turkey ties, how Trump and Erdogan's new and old problems may impact Israel. And so there's a big, what's Trump going to do with Erdogan? Does he understand Erdogan? And there are people that I respect them on a lot of things, but they're like so pro-Turkey, it really drives me crazy. So what happened in Turkey was there's a guy who's going to run against Erdogan in the next election. I thought it was this year or next. It might not be till 2028, but they're already starting to run. You think our presidential campaigns are long? And so Erdogan, he's 71, and this may be his last shot to get a 5-year term. I mean, compared to Trump, he's kind of a spring chicken, but so I don't know, but he had an opposition as the mayor of Istanbul, and now this guy's up on corruption charges, and he's in jail, and everybody's upset. So his wife is leading some of the protests against Erdogan. Also in Syria, they formed a new government. And again, that Seth Fransman has a good article at the Jerusalem Post today, just put out this morning, a couple hours ago, about how they put all these ministers in place. And all of a sudden, they've got these young Islamist technocrats. They wear suits. They're very open and affirming, and they're very They get along, they cooperate and all this. And I don't believe any of this for a second. And Erdogan is behind all of this. He is controlling this. So it says in his article, a number of other HTS, that's the organization that al-Shara, his current name, comes from. You know, he's obviously using the barber chair that Assad left behind in the palace, presidential palace in Damascus, to get cleaned up. And so they've got a minister, and they're bringing them, all these guys down from Idlib. This is where they were all sent. This is where their enclave was. And this is where Erdogan focused all of his money and effort to get them to come together. And they came together. I don't know if the Syrian army was just not brave enough or just not organized enough or it wasn't competent enough. But as Putin said in his news conference, they took over Damascus with 800 guys against an army of 40,000. It's pretty impressive. So, let's see. So I don't have time to talk about this shameful silence from America's top law firms. I mean, Trump's going after all these guys, and some are caving, and the associates are upset. By the way, associates are always upset, okay? The coffee's not hot enough, or, you know, not enough Starbucks in the kitchen or something. You know, they're just, I used to be an associate, okay? But I was above all that because I didn't drink coffee. So, IDF strikes in Beirut. Here's that article I told you about. Parents arrested for complaining about their school. This is the UK, where they had the Magna Carta at the British Library. Maybe somebody should go work on it. This was interesting. Zelensky came out early last week and he said, Putin is going to die soon. And then what happened yesterday? Out near the FSB, which is the sort of the organization that is a carry-on from the KGB. Putin was a KGB guy, the FSB headquarters in Moscow. One of Putin's limousines exploded. Now, you know, I'm sure it could have just been an accident. I'm sure nobody checked to see if there were any bombs in the limousine. Something happened, and that's going to be a problem. Israel continues to be in major turmoil. There's some legislation about, so Netanyahu fired the head of the Shin Bet, which is sort of like our FBI, but it's not like our FBI. It's got a little bit broader terms, and it's Israel's in the midst of what they call a constitutional crisis in a country that doesn't have a constitution. They have basic laws and a lot of protests. I think 85% of the country supports what they're doing to Hezbollah, to the Houthis in the areas of Judea and Samaria and in Gaza. But there's a leftist element, and as you saw at Huckabee's hearing, these people are everywhere. They're very incorrigible, and they're fighting everything. Part of the problem in Israel is they're having a demographic shift. The Orthodox Jews who the Haredi, they don't serve in the government, they don't serve in the armed forces. And that's causing problems. And some of the people in Israel are getting very resentful of that. They're going to do something about it. Here's an attack. This happens a few times a week. This is the Zofar app that I use for red alerts. And you can see this was at about 10 o'clock in Israel time this morning, or almost 11 o'clock Israel time this morning. All these people having to go to bomb shelters and that type of thing. I don't have time to go into this, even though I promised to. There's a very good parliamentary commission report that came out of the UK that details what happened on October 7th. You can find it, just look up 7 October Parliamentary Commission Report. You'll get the PDF. It's 315 or 350 pages long. Very detailed, highly recommend. I mean, they have like a timeline in there. They have like the organizational structure and who all these people are. The interesting thing about the timeline, in the US, there are a bunch of Students for Justice in Palestine, and pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian student groups on college campuses all across the country. Many of those had Telegram accounts that were dormant. They weren't being used. Suddenly, people are going back and looking at the timeline of when the attacks started down near, they started coming across the Gaza border. About 3 minutes before those attacks started, those Telegram accounts were reactivated. And now we have this massive propaganda push. I think this thing we have not yet begun to unpack how planned this was and how many people knew about it, and people on campuses in the United States. Why would they reactivate those accounts just 3 minutes? It just happened to do that 3 minutes before the attack started. It seems very strange to me. A year ago, The Economist did an article, Israel alone. Nobody supports Israel and that type of thing. And so a year ago, Israel had problems when we talk about the 7, 8, 9, 10 fronts that they're facing, Gaza, the Judea, Samaria, Hezbollah, Syria, Iraq, Iran, the Houthis, the media, social media front, and all that. And so even The Economist kind of, we're a little bit, they're pretty tough spot. Nobody really supports them. So what's happened in the last year? They take out Nasrallah, they destroy 80% of the Hezbollah rockets, they've pretty much flattened Gaza. It's still not done there. They have massive operations undergoing in Judea, Samaria, called the West Bank. They've taken over effective control buffer zones in Syria. They've taken out all these Syrian arms and army weapons depots so that al-Shara and his Islamist guys can't get a hold of this stuff. Let's see, what's this? Oh, so this article a year ago, this was the article that The Economist put up. The war in Gaza may topple Hamas without making Israel safer. And there's some truth to that. What's victory? How do you measure victory? I heard I'm going to get his name wrong, Dan Schulftan. By the way, go listen to the IDSF daily briefings. They're at, now with the time change, they'll be at 10 a.m. Monday through Thursday, half hour, not like me, they don't drone on for an hour and a half. A lot of really good information. My friend Danny Seaman was on there the other day. He's got a new podcast that just premiered the other day on JNS. You should like and follow that there. But you get good information there. There's a lot of places to get information. So you should follow these people and support them. So Israel's massive problems have got everybody's against us. Now a year goes by, they took out Nasrallah, they took out this, they did this, they did this, they did this. They took out the Iranian air defenses. Iran fired hundreds of missiles and hardly any damage. So now what's The Economist say? So this is the new cover in the Middle East for The Economist issue. Israel's hubris. Look at those arrogant people in Israel. Look at what they're doing around the world. They're actually defending themselves. So there was also, I'm jumping around here because I've got a few things I want to do and then we're getting out of here. So Trump is giving Europe vertigo, and not just about Ukraine. They have big meetings in Europe. What are we going to do with this Donald Trump? What are we going to do with this? There was a big article in the, I think it's Spanish newspaper. Is that French or is that, I don't know, French, Italian, or Spanish? Can't tell the difference, They're all Romance languages, right? But this is a big test for Europe. What are they going to do? They're putting together all these committees and meetings about how they're going to deal with the problem in Russia. Der Spiegel, has this. This is kind of an interesting article in Der Spiegel. This article from Jerusalem Post on the left, is Europe stepping up to the plate? The translation of that cover in Der Spiegel is why the rearmation of Germany and Europe is becoming so difficult and expensive. And part of it is, and so here's Putin on the phone. What about the ceasefire? And he says, well, how about never? Never's good for me. They bring Zelensky in for all these meetings. This is from the Times of London this morning. Devilish Putin is tempting Trump with a deal that exploits his desire for glory. But here's the problem with Europe. How is Europe going to go? You got to read these different articles. Bristol, England. Bristol's now a boom town, so why is its birth rate slumping? This is true all over the West. It's true in China, it's true in Russia, it's true in Japan. And I'm trying to process, in the age of demographic collapse, how does this affect Bible prophecy? Because I think it's a very, very big deal. Japan will lose millions in population this year. China losing millions, tens of millions in population almost every year. And these birth rates, well, they have all these, oh, we're going to bring it back, we're going to do this. The birth rates, the fastest decline in female fertility in human history has been in Iran. How does this process, what do the governments in place say, to cement our legacy, we better do all of this stuff that's in Bible prophecy now? I kind of think that's what's going to happen. But in Bristol, they talk about the fact that they're just not having babies. They were going to open this new birth clinic. It's closed because nobody's having babies. The women don't want to get married. And you don't have babies, you don't have guys to serve in the military. And it's a problem all across Europe. In fact, this is a big podcast with The Economist this week. Europe's demographic destiny. Well, there is certain people groups that are having people. So we had a big earthquake in Myanmar this week. Some horrific pictures and stuff like this 30-story building under construction. I mean, I've watched some of these videos. There's, construction cranes falling and guys falling. The guys have been killed. There was one guy, I think in this article, he said, my daughter was working on the 22nd floor. I prayed that Buddha protected her. And then there were these wave pools on the top of some of these hotels, not to make light of it. Actually, there's an architectural engineering reason that they put these pools on the top because it helps stabilize the building in the event of an earthquake. But, you don't usually think on the 40th floor that surfs up, right? I think I'd get out of that pool. That's just me. So Trump wrote the letter to Iran, and here's his response at a news conference the other day. By the way, he had Paula White pray at that. I do not like that. Somebody needs to get in his face about that. I'm sorry. Okay. Theological discussion over. Here's Trump talking about Iran in response to some questions.
The vice president is in Greenland right now. Do you have plans to expand U.S. military presence in Greenland? Is that...
We get along very well with Greenland. We get along very well with Denmark. We've always had a good relationship. Denmark does a lot of business in the United States. We don't do so much there, but they do a lot of business in the United States. And I think they want to see, I think everybody wants to see that work out. We need Greenland, very importantly, for international security. We have to have Greenland. It's not a question of, do you think we can do without it? We can't. If you look at Greenland right now, if you look at the waterways, you have Chinese and Russian ships all over the place. And we're not going to be able to do that. We're not relying on Denmark or anybody else to take care of that situation. And we're not talking about peace for the United States. We're talking about world peace. We're talking about international security. And right now, you look at it, you have warships all over the place going through right along Greenland. We're not going to let that happen. We cannot let that happen. Or if it's going to happen, we have to be protective of our country. And more important, not only of our country, of the world. So Greenland is very important. In modern day weaponry makes Greenland 100 years ago, less so. But also, if you notice, also some of those, you could call them roadways, okay? They're water roadways, but some of those areas are opening up, and they're opening up icebreakers out there. They're opening them, and by just nature, they're opening them, and they're headed right into China, right into Russia, and we have no choice. The answer is he's there with his wonderful wife, Usha. They're there right now. They landed a couple of hours ago, and they will represent us well. But Greenland's very important for the peace of the world, not us, the peace of the entire world. And I think Denmark understands it. I think the European Union understands it. And if they don't, we're going to have to explain it to them.
So, and by the way, Putin gave a talk this week on the Arctic, very important strategically. The importance of the Arctic for Russia and the world is growing, he said, and unfortunately, geopolitical competition in the region is increasing as well. And he said this, the importance of the Arctic for Russia and the world is growing. Oh, I copied the wrong. Anyway, what he said is the U.S. has long been interested in Greenland. He goes back and he cites historical things that happened back in the 1860s, the 1890s, and certain treaties and, you know, people negotiating, trying to get Greenland because they knew it would be a strategic, important place. So he acknowledges it. I mean, he's a smart guy. Don't trust him a bit, but okay. And now here's Trump on Iran. I'm going to close with this.
Listen, would you like to disagree with Iranian drones are attacking Ukraine every day.
Let's say
Iranian drones are attacking and killing Ukrainians every day. Why aren't you doing something about that?
well, we're going to see what happens with that. I'm getting reports on that, and we're looking at a report. You're right. They make a lot of drones. Iran makes a lot of drones. They make very effective drones, too. They do very effectively at some things, but Iran is very high on my list of things to watch. And as you probably know, I sent them a letter just recently, and I said, you're going to have to make a decision one way or the other. And we're going to either have to talk and talk it out, or very bad things are going to happen to Iran. And I don't want that to happen. Big preference, and I don't say this through strength or weakness. My big preference is we work it out with Iran. But if we don't work it out, bad things are going to happen to Iran.
And so then everybody's talking about this good article, what the Iran war of 2025 might look like. And then this from Open Source Intel. That's one of the Open Source Intel guys I follow. According to N12 News, the IDF has been instructed to finalize all preparations for a strike on Iran by mid-2005. And it's as this article in the Jerusalem Post says, it's a grave threat. I mean, it's a big deal. They say that they have. I don't understand our national intelligence report saying, well, they've suspended their program, but then the IAEA comes out just this week in intelligence people looking at it says they've got enough. They could have 6 bombs in 2 weeks, max. That's not good for the world. You don't want these people who I think Trevor Loud in the interview said, as I had told us, they have a very strange view of heaven, or I heard that someplace this week, because they think they can cause the world to have chaos. Their Mahdi will come and they'll rule the world, and it's a good thing for them to bring about Armageddon, is the way the apocalypse. And so this is a tough problem. So anyway, as you can appreciate, there's a lot of things going on, a little bit disheveled, a little bit disorganized this week. So just think of it as my wheel of prophecy is spinning, and as things fly off, I grab one and I do a slide, and then I grab another one and do a slide. So that's how control chaos, right? So that, and keep an eye on that canary. He might show up again. Anyway, let's pray. Lord, thanks for your word. We appreciate, Lord, so much that you've given us information about the future so we can understand what's going on. We pray that you will watch over us this week, give us opportunities to share the gospel, give us wisdom to operate in an increasingly evil world. Bless us in Jesus' name, amen.